What it's like to be a physical war god in a magical world. Matthew, dubbed the Harry Potter Pro Max in physics, hides the fact that he can't use magic. Relying solely on his immense physical strength, he manages to enroll in a magical academy under the guise of a wizard. There, he defeats the Seven Fangs and claims their organization's coin, progressing towards the highest rank of God Awakener. This, however, draws the attention of a villainous group suspected to be led by Grindelwald. Using physical damage, Matthew shatters the morale of his enemies. Soon, the news that he lacks magical abilities spreads, a significant anomaly in a world where even a passing dog knows a spell or two. A rescued student insists Matthew can't perform magic and wants to report him. However, Dart and his friends staunchly defend Matthew's magical facade, narrowly escaping exposure. When other students challenge him, Matthew awkwardly asserts his magical prowess after a warning from his roommate Finn. When a provocative student accuses Finn of shielding Matthew, suggesting both could face expulsion, Finn snaps back, telling him to mind his own business. The situation escalates until Rames, a fiercely protective brother, arrives with a severely injured Dart, silencing any further objections. Matthew and his friends throw a victory party in their dorm, surprisingly inviting Abel and Abis, leaders of the defeated Seven Fangs. The party is chaotic, with unexpected guests making it rather disorderly. During the event, Rames recounts encountering convicts in the school's dungeons, an alarming revelation. After the party concludes, Dart lies gravely injured. Abis reveals that Pure Origin, a notorious criminal organization, is now targeting Matthew. Abel's collaboration with them and his distinctive 3 stripes were acquired through experiments with Pure Origin, indicating a magic far more terrifying than anticipated. Abis believes Abel, influenced by his mother, is inherently kind but misled. Thanks to Matthew, they've been awakened to their errors. At the same time, a senior student seeking proof of Matthew's lack of magic overhears his conversation and spots Abel, which frightens him into fleeing. Meanwhile, Matthew receives a letter that turns Raymond pale with fear. Matthew is summoned by the magical authorities to face charges of being non-magical. The judge declares that the world, created by deities, was intended for magic, a divine gift to humanity. Matthew's non-magical nature is deemed an aberration. Unfazed, Matthew counters, questioning the perfection of divine workings, and humorously suggests that perhaps the gods simply forgot to bestow magic upon him. Fortunately, within the God Awakeners, there were those who defended Matthew. The captain of the magical guard, Glenn, declared that they live by rules. He suggested that if Matthew wants to make the rules, he should climb to the top and gain the authority to create new ones. Glenn challenged Matthew by placing a candle in front of him and asking him to light it without touching it. If Matthew couldn't demonstrate a miracle beyond magic, he wouldn't have a leg to stand on. The judge thought Glenn was being harsh, but Matthew rubbed his hands together to create fire and easily lit the candle, declaring he would break the rule. Glenn released him on the spot, though the judge did not agree. Meanwhile, other God Awakeners arrived at the courtroom. Matthew blocked the incoming dust storm, and 6 God Awakeners entered, summoned by the headmaster and holding important positions. The leader, Ott, argued against making an exception based on momentary emotions, especially since Matthew hid his inability to use magic and attended a magic academy, suggesting he should pay with his life. Suddenly, the judge was possessed by Pure Origin, who expressed interest in Matthew. Matthew declared he was not anyone's property, exposing Pure Origin and effectively declaring war on the Magical Bureau. The bug possessing the judge could transfer to anyone who tried to remove it magically. Glenn intended to deal with the bug, but Matthew acted first, swallowing it. Everyone thought he was doomed, but he spat the bug out, turning it into a balloon dog, stunning the onlookers. Glenn admired Matthew, but Ott still insisted on executing him. As Ott moved to take Matthew away, Matthew refused to leave. When Ott tried to attack, Glenn intervened and, surprisingly, a large sword appeared in front of Matthew, wielded by the youngest God Awakener, Ren, brought by the headmaster. Ott insisted on killing Matthew, but the headmaster suggested that since Pure Origin rarely sends messengers, Matthew might be a valuable asset against them. They couldn't afford to lose him now. Matthew was touched by the headmaster's kindness. Glenn explained that the headmaster was a former God Awakener, and the only one who had confronted pure origin in his youth. A living legend. Ott understood but disagreed, insisting on following the rules. Unexpectedly, the headmaster removed his hat and pleaded for Matthew to be given a chance, saying Matthew had the power to move hearts. He confessed that he had long felt it was unfair to treat non-magic users as inferiors, and although changing rules and perceptions required courage, many lacked it. However, he saw potential in Matthew, and even Ren spoke up in his defense. Still, the God Awakeners believed rules could not be changed, but the judge, now awake, also pleaded for leniency, despite previously valuing the rules. Matthew, who lacks magic, saved him and was willing to take full responsibility, asking everyone to give Matthew a chance. Reluctantly, Ott proposed a condition, stating Matthew was just a pawn in their search for pure origin. He must live under their surveillance and become a God Awakener candidate within the year to prove his strength. Matthew responded, "Is that all?" He first wanted to beat up whatever pure origin was to settle his grudge. Matthew shared this with Finn and the others. Reams then realized that Matthew wasn't lying about their previous fight. He truly couldn't use magic, and Reams felt somewhat abrupt. Dart suggested that it didn't matter. They should go out and have fun first. Finn thought Dart wanted to ease Matthew's tension. When they went out over the weekend, Dart showed up in armor and Matthew in training gear. Finn was embarrassed and didn't want to stand with them. Fortunately, Reams looked normal. But shockingly, he wore his sister's anime costume under his trench coat. Finn was fed up with this craziness. Eventually, at Finn's insistence, they all changed into normal clothes. Dart noted that there was only one amusement park on this street, but their outing turned into a fight scene. Reams also had a goal. He wanted to buy a new magic wand because the God Awakener candidate selection had started early. They had enough coins to participate in the evaluation. Reams stated he wouldn't go easy on Matthew for his sister's sake. The four arrived at the magic wand shop. Isn't this the magic wand shop from Harry Potter? Finn thought. Since they were there, he might as well get a new one. In front of the magic circle, releasing magic would automatically attract the suitable wand. As magic power increases, wands need to be replaced. The wand Reams summoned was said to be very powerful. The shopkeeper, curious, looked at Matthew and asked if he would choose a wand too. Matthew said he could try. When he approached, he found a wand on the ground that no one had been able to pick up for thousands of years due to its immense weight and seal. It was said that beneath the wand was a fairy spring, whose water could forge even stronger wands. Finn and Dart sensed trouble. As expected, Matthew immediately became interested and picked up the wand, causing spring water to burst out. Without a second word, the shopkeeper gave the wand to Matthew. Due to the leakage, Reams ended up not buying the wand he wanted. Just after leaving the magic wand shop, they encountered Raymond and the enthusiastic senior. Everyone had a great day together. Matthew was quite moved, as he had never hung out with friends before. They even made plans to hang out again soon. What kind of flag is this? Matthew thought as he counted 7 coins, pondering the upcoming exam. He remembered asking Ren for a leave a few days ago. Ren couldn't believe it. Was he really planning to go home before the assessment? Matthew, feeling guilty, verbally gave up. However, once he returned to the dorm, he insisted he had to go home. Meanwhile, Ott went to the dorm supervisor, Margaret, hoping she would prevent Matthew from participating in the assessment. But Margaret, who thrives on excitement, isn't someone who simply does what she's told. However, upon hearing that Matthew had defeated Abel from the neighboring 7 magic teeth without using magic, she became interested and played a piano piece to express her feelings, startling the twin magicians nearby. Grandpa was very moved to see Matthew come home, especially since he brought friends, even though they were all quite eccentric. Only Finn seemed normal, but Grandpa was still very touched. After all, Matthew had never been out before. He had never thought his child would make friends, and hoped these days would continue. Finn remarked that they definitely would. However, Margaret had already come to cause trouble, and surprisingly, they were stopped by Ren before reaching Matthew's home. Meanwhile, Matthew and the others were playing rock, paper, scissors at home, seemingly carefree. In the Magic Academy, each dorm has a supervisor with top-notch abilities and the potential to become a God Awakener. Margaret, who entered a magic competition at 9 and defeated all her opponents single-handedly, becoming famous, might look tough, but is an artist at heart, often conjuring a piano to play her feelings, leaving Ren baffled. Is this guy okay? They wondered. The two fought fiercely outside while inside. Matthew and his friends played a Magic World version of Monopoly. Of the 5 dice rollers, only Finn had a normal outcome. The rest were unlucky, breaking their defenses on the spot. Outside, neither Margaret nor Ren gave in. Margaret's skill is to transform musical notes into any form of attack. Once Ren uses magic, the notes explode. Margaret believes that the human nature is to seek thrills, arguing that a boring life is no different from death. Ren, who typically helps others out of boredom, now wants to fight Matthew, who has no magic. Rennie says Matthew is special, always boasting that he can change the world's rules. At this moment, Margaret noticed a change in Rennes's aura. Back at the tribunal, the staff worried if Margaret got serious, Rennes might not win. The principal mentioned that Rennes likes taking care of others and talked about the marks on his face, which increase with magical power. The academy has many second-tier magicians, but third-tier ones are rare. Rennes is the youngest third-tier magician in history. While Matthew was still rolling dice, he realized that no matter how he threw them, the outcome always revealed his inability to use magic, leading to his execution. Distressed, he decided to step outside for some fresh air. Everyone thought he must be upset, but Matthew actually went out just to sneak some limited edition cream puffs. Just as he arrived, he saw Rennes and Margaret fighting. Margaret noticed Rennes had 3 lines, and her expression twisted with excitement. Rennes knew Margaret was likely manipulated by Ott. He said Matthew was different from other non-magic users who felt abandoned by the gods, always lamenting and blaming the heavens. Unlike them, Matthew was fighting his fate, something someone focused on bloodline theories like Margaret would probably not understand. And indeed, he wasn't interested. The twin magicians knew Margaret wasn't interested in God Awakeners. They had stolen many coins, but donated them all to the dorm. They possessed arrogant talents and could attack using music. They believed their musical notes had restricted Ren from using magic chants. However, the difference between a third-tier and a second-tier magician isn't just that the former are chosen by the gods. Besides having more powerful magic, they can also unleash the true form of magic wands, which is the real significance of being chosen by the gods. The wand contains divine power, and Ren's wand is a giant sword. The next moment, Margaret was sent flying by a strike from it. Matthew quietly emerged from the woods, having overheard the conversation. He decided to thank Ren's first. Ren, unwilling to admit he was helping, merely said he was passing by and wanted to play with some rabbits. Matthew teased him about his love for rabbits. Ren then informed Matthew that the assessment was about to start. He wasn't good at giving pep talks, but mentioned that there are no second chances in failure, only rewards for winning. Though Margaret wasn't seriously injured, she protected her twins first and decided to target Matthew during the assessment. Matthew, having more coins, decided to share them with Finn and Dart, preparing to take the exam together. Finn, holding the coins, burst into tears because he couldn't even take the exam. The night before the exam, everyone had trouble sleeping. Matthew also had a heart-to-heart with his grandfather, who knew about Matthew's exposure as a non-magic user and the necessity of surviving the assessment. He blamed himself, thinking if he could have hidden Matthew's secret better, Matthew wouldn't have to suffer this way. However, Matthew didn't regret his experiences, as his life was given by his grandfather, and he was always satisfied with it. To become a God Awakener, one must pass 3 assessments. This year's second assessment was moved up due to the pure origin requirement. Normally, participation in the second assessment requires 5 coins, but this time only 3 are needed. Thus, Finn and Dart also had the opportunity to join. Margaret participated in this assessment as well. Before Matthew's entrance, Ott came forward, declaring that he would not allow anyone outside the rules to exist. Matthew ignored him, encouraging himself and his muscles before stepping onto the assessment site. Upon seeing Matthew, the crowd started murmuring as his inability to use magic had become known. They all shouted for Matthew to leave. Finn felt this was too harsh since Matthew had earned his coins through his own effort. Prepared to comfort Matthew, he was surprised to see Matthew looking like he wanted to go home, underestimating his thick skin. In this assessment, they had to enter a forest, avoid undead pursuers, and collect keys floating in balloons. Finn burst into tears the moment he saw the undead. The competition was broadcasted through a magic mirror. Before Finn could stop crying, he was thrown into the arena, just wanting to go home to sleep. The students were dropped into the forest. some unlucky ones encountered the undead right away and instinctively used magic to counterattack, only to find the undead immune to magic. A touch by an axe meant immediate elimination, and one was disqualified right at the start, leaving 11 competitors. Some realized this trial was to test their ability to evade enemy pursuit and make decisions under escape conditions. Everyone was eager to see the top students' desperate attempts to run. Before they could get excited, they saw Matthew punch an undead in the broadcast. However, the undead only felt pain and couldn't be killed. Disappointed, Matthew turned to run, deciding to find the key instead of wasting energy. Unexpectedly, he shrank midway. Another contestant had cast a spell on him and brought him to a safe area. Matthew thanked him, and the senior said cooperation seemed more effective in this test. Deciding to form an alliance, Matthew agreed since he was helped. The senior wanted to discuss strategy, but Matthew's mind was only on cream puffs. Hearing about strategy, he would shut down. The senior decided they should follow the undead, and Matthew, having an empty mind, believed anything said. While others avoided the undead, the clever senior quietly led Matthew to follow them. Sure enough, they found a balloon with a key nearby, guarded by patrolling undead. Under the balloon was a black object Matthew thought was an air pump. Touching it, a sharp horn sound went off. The two ran away. Considering that inflating the balloon would trigger the horn, Matthew suggested bursting the balloon. They quietly approached it, but touching the balloon still sounded the horn. The undead chased them again, forcing them to find a way to escape. After trying other methods to destroy the pump with the horn, they still failed to pop the balloon. At that moment, Matthew had an idea. The senior's magic could alter the size of objects, so Matthew asked him to enlarge the balloon. Then, Matthew spun rapidly using breakdance moves, creating a windstorm that successfully inflated the balloon, allowing him to swiftly grab the key inside. As they secured the key, other competitors also managed to get theirs, only Finn was still trembling. However, he encountered Dart, who was covered in blood. Dart assured him that he would think of a solution, but Finn suggested he first take care of his bleeding. Meanwhile, Matthew planned to give the key to the senior, but the senior revealed that he already knew how to get the key and had heard about Matthew from Ren. He wanted to support Matthew and urged him to leave with the key. Matthew thanked him and left, but soon after, the senior was entangled by a strange student. Holding the key, Matthew returned to the arena, drawing curious looks. He noticed that Dart and Finn were seriously injured, and Rems was curious how Matthew, who couldn't use magic, obtained the key. Matthew explained that a kind senior had helped him, but seemed to have other troubles since he had urged Matthew to leave. At that moment, the host announced the last qualifying contestant. The senior emerged covered in blood but collapsed immediately after stepping out. The actual key holder was someone named Capaccio, who severely injured the senior and insulted him by stepping on his head. Matthew intervened to stop him. Finn remembered Capaccio as this year's top internal candidate, an elite like Reams. Capaccio, intending to throw water at Matthew, watched as Matthew caught the water and even mixed protein powder into it, calmly telling Capaccio that he considered himself the strongest, having never met anyone stronger. This provoked Capaccio, who almost attacked Matthew on the spot, but the host intervened just in time to announce the next match. The 9 competitors were split into 3 teams: red, yellow, and blue. Each team member held their own crystal, and their task was to break the other team's crystals. Losing a crystal meant the whole team was out of the competition, turning it into a team match. Finn was worried because their team's strongest in magic, Rames, was on another team, and the crystals were fragile. Before Finn could strategize, he saw Matthew accidentally break his own crystal, and Dart's as well, claiming the crystals were too slippery. Despairing at their start, Finn watched as Dart and Matthew gave a thumbs up, saying it was perfect, as it left no room but to protect Finn's crystal. They were then teleported into a labyrinth, randomly scattered, belying their promise to protect Finn, leaving him feeling split. Someone give Finn a hug. He looks shattered. Don't even think about Rems. Any team with Matthew is bound to have issues. Finn knew his teammates had lost their crystals. He had to protect his own at all costs, or else their whole team would be doomed. Just a few steps in, he ran into Capaccio, who could transfer his own injuries to his opponents. Calmly, he struck Finn with a knife, claiming that from birth, one's status is determined, and those without talent are only fit to pave the way. Seeing the danger, Finn knew he couldn't confront him. He tried to camouflage himself as a wall, desperate not to be spotted by Capaccio. But whatever you fear comes to pass. Capaccio strolled up behind Finn, who was guarded by a nurse wrapped in bandages. Capaccio recognized Finn, remembering him as the weakest internal candidate. He thought Finn was worthless to be at a magic academy, and now here at the God Awakener selection, believing he got in through his brother's influence. He demanded Finn hand over the crystal. Finn feared those with great power, but the crystal was crucial for his friend's futures. He resolved to protect it well, but Capaccio sensed something was off. He cast a spell immediately, hurting Finn, forcing him to hand over the crystal or else face the same fate as the previous losers. At this moment, Matthew was frantically making his way, while Margaret was analyzing the notable competitors. Her targets were Matthew, the top new candidate Rames, and the internal candidate Capaccio. Margaret knew Capaccio, like her, was uninterested in the so-called God Awakener examination. This time, he probably made a deal with Ott, who was a 1-in-a-million talent chosen by the magic wand. Capaccio didn't understand why Finn struggled, as handing over the crystal was the sensible choice, sparing him physical suffering. But Finn endured silently, took advantage of Capaccio's lowered guard, pretended to use magic, but actually turned to run. Using a magic of inherent transfer when Capaccio almost caught up, he thought he could escape, but suddenly his thigh was pierced, and Capaccio caught up, stepping on Finn's injured leg, stabbing his abdomen several times, though the damage transferred to Finn. Still, Finn didn't hand over the crystal, knowing he was weak but couldn't betray his friends. Capaccio, annoyed by this, even planned to slit his throat, but at the crucial moment, Matthew arrived, slamming Capaccio's head against the wall. Strangely, it was Matthew who got injured. Capaccio stood up unharmed. He said his magic wand was special, able to reflect all damage back to the opponent, while his own wounds would heal, with the injuries absorbed by the wand. This power, a blessing from the wand that chose him, meant Capaccio had never felt pain since birth. Laughing arrogantly, he said, "Break my wand and I'll behave." The principal knew that Capaccio's magic wand was one of only 13 ancient wands in the magical world, marking him as a talent chosen by the Demon Lord Cain. The wand enabled him to inflict unavoidable damage on his opponents by targeting himself. However, Matthew was undeterred and rushed to strike with several punches, but the damage rebounded onto himself. Capaccio believed that people's destinies were predetermined. He mocked Matthew's efforts as futile and said the same of Finn, who had always been at the bottom of his class since middle school. Compared to his talented brother Ren, Finn had even failed multiple grades. Capaccio argued that such individuals should recognize their shortcomings and give up early. Finn was disheartened by these comments, but Matthew told Capaccio that while self-reflection was necessary, self-deprecation was not. Despite his fear, Finn was willing to face enemies far stronger than himself for his friends. Capaccio mocked his friend's bravery, prompting Matthew to relentlessly continue his attacks. Capaccio found Matthew's persistence dull, assuming that repeated attacks would overwhelm the wand. Others had tried this before without success. Suddenly, Capaccio heard the sound of the guardian goddess statue breaking, realizing it too had limits. Matthew's powerful punch made the statue cry out. He told Capaccio he was much stronger than him and wondered if Capaccio would show courage like Finn when facing a stronger opponent. The goddess had a second phase, becoming enraged and launching massive syringes at Matthew, all of which he dodged. Capaccio watched as Matthew pulled out a wand from his pocket, bending it into a tennis racket shape. Using a cotton ball, Matthew struck with the force of a heavy fall directly at the goddess's face while dodging the syringes. He continued to hit the statue, widening the cracks on its face. The spectators were shocked as Matthew shattered the statue in front of Capaccio. Matthew asked Capaccio if he knew what pain felt like. "No matter. Your pain is coming." He struck Capaccio's head with the racket. The crowd was abuzz, wondering how he had defeated the Chosen One. Finn felt he had caused trouble for Matthew, but Matthew said he was the slow one and thanked Finn for helping him reach this point. Capaccio, feeling pain for the first time, realized his defeat. The team competition continued with Margaret from the yellow team encountering two red team players. Margaret, skilled at assessing strength through musical notes, deemed these opponents as second to last in the scale. She advised them to surrender their crystals and leave quickly. Underestimating Margaret's strength, the two players still thought they had a chance 2 against 1, but Margaret easily crushed their crystals, proving her superior skill. With Capaccio defeated, the first team has been eliminated, ending the exam. Reims did not get the chance to face Matthew, and Dart was confused about how he won without doing anything. However, as they left the exam hall, the audience was silent. The principal also mentioned that Matthew's toughest test was yet to come, as his next opponent would likely be Margaret, the strongest student. Even Matthew's pectoral muscles reminded him that this opponent was formidable. God Awakener spoke with the principal, acknowledging Margaret's strength as the top among all students. Last year, Ren was selected by God Awakener in his second year, largely because Margaret did not participate in the exams. He had seen Margaret dominate competitions with her impressive second-phase magic, and was curious why the principal was so protective of Matthew. He doubted Matthew's ability to compete against Margaret, believing the gap in their abilities to be vast. Some students who were eliminated tried to persuade Margaret to kill Matthew, even suggesting drugging him first. Margaret refused to let anyone harm her opponent and warned Ott, who was eager to act. Meanwhile, Matthew and Raymond were acting wildly, with Dart trying to win Raymond's affection, to no avail. Finn thought his teammates seemed seriously ill and desperately wanted to go home. Amid the chaos, God Awakener, who had just spoken with the principal, wandered into Matthew's rest area. Matthew recognized him as one of the people who bullied him with Ott. He remembered the man's name was Cosina, the head of the Magic Talent Management Bureau. Anyone wanting to join the Bureau needed Cosina's approval. Without it, they could not become God Awakener. Cosina proposed playing a game with Matthew, threatening him, which Matthew could not refuse. Cosina said he wouldn't let Matthew play for free. If Matthew won this thrilling game, he would pass the exam unconditionally. The game was to guess black or white, requiring Matthew to look in the opposite direction of where Cosina pointed. Matthew agreed to the game, but Cosina attacked him from the opposite direction, forcing him to look where he pointed. However, Matthew dodged all attacks. Cosina then drew his magic sword, which could burn anything with its flames, thinking Matthew couldn't withstand such an attack. Finn thought it was too dangerous, as Cosina attacked from 3 directions. Matthew had to look down, and as Cosina's weapon approached, he struck from both sides, and then from below. It seemed Matthew couldn't avoid it, but he used his feat's strength to pull up stones from the ground, staying within the circle. Just then, an owl snatched Matthew's cream puff, causing him to instinctively glance right. He admitted his loss, but Cosina said it didn't count, commenting that Matthew would still struggle against Margaret. Matthew knew Cosina was strong. After all, he had just cast magic without any incantations and had even held back, which could have otherwise led to serious consequences. However, Cosina thought Matthew was quite capable and would be a valuable asset if he could rise to the challenge. He looked forward to seeing Matthew reach greater heights. The third test was a one-on-one match, starting with Matthew versus Margaret. They faced off in the arena. Unexpectedly, Matthew pulled out a cream puff to refuel, and surprisingly, Margaret also revealed her eccentricity by showing a strong liking for tartar sauce, enjoying it with her fried shrimp merely as a side dish. Dart, watching from the stands, felt uneasy. From his years of experience, he knew that the more mentally unorthodox competitors were often the strongest. It seemed Matthew was in for a tough match. Cosina, aware of Ott's choice of Margaret and not having sabotaged Matthew further, had absolute trust in Margaret's capabilities. When Margaret released her magic power, Finn felt a bit nauseous from the impact. Margaret launched a magical attack first. Dart and the others thought Matthew could handle it, but he was pushed back by the blast wave and then disappeared. Suddenly, Matthew reappeared behind Margaret, hoisted her up with a back hold, and propelled them into the air with a forceful kick, attempting to slam her down. Dart, who heard that Matthew had quickly retreated when catching the ball, complained about the lack of a magical atmosphere. However, he had come to terms with it. After all, spending too much time with the insane could affect one's own sanity. Yet, despite such a slam, Margaret was unharmed. While Matthew was clashing with Margaret, Cosina spotted Margaret cushioning her fall with music magic when Matthew threw her from the air. Matthew claimed it was muscle magic, which some students actually believed. Matthew and Margaret engaged again. When Margaret was about to hit Matthew, she stopped. noticing he seemed to be protecting something. He then pulled a cream puff from his pocket. Margaret realized Matthew was distracted and couldn't fully commit to the fight. She suggested he set aside the cream puff. Matthew remarked on his knightly spirit, while Dart, watching, scorned their antics, frustrated by the wasted suspense. Rems knew they were still testing each other and hadn't shown their true skills yet. Kusina was eager to see Margaret's second-tier magic, believing the battle could be decided in an instant if she got serious. Margaret attacked with a giant fist made of musical notes, which had no physical form, making it impossible for Matthew to counter. However, the internal burst from the notes caused Matthew severe injuries. Margaret thought little of him and surrounded him with giant trumpets, the sound waves from which cracked the ground. The battle seemed one-sided, and Margaret was hailed as a genius. Kusina knew Margaret was still holding back, but was surprised when Matthew vanished just as the sound waves spread. He had dived underground, right beneath Margaret, reducing the sound damage. Matthew's surprise kick sent Margaret flying, and he quickly followed up with rapid punches. Observers thought his attack overly harsh. However, Kusina knew Margaret was yet to unveil her full power. She got up, revealing her second form. "What's going on? Matthew even knocked her hair out. What is this? A beauty punch?" Kusina suggested Matthew use a global strike. "Oh, so this is Margaret's true form?" Meanwhile, Glenn was pondering Matthew's true ability when he heard that Pure Origin was making moves. Preparing to mobilize, he was shocked to learn that Pure Origin himself was coming. This is terribly bad. Back in the fight, Margaret unleashed her true form, merging her magic and voice. She could instantly move to any location her voice reached. Unless Matthew's attack exceeded the speed of sound, setting such a flag was futile. Margaret's snapping fingers teleported her, smashing Matthew into the ground, but he braced against a wall, dodging her subsequent snap attack. Kusina realized Matthew had used the sound to anticipate the attack. Is this a world of magic or physics? While Matthew counterattacked, Margaret noticed extra tartar sauce on her hand. Because of this, her fingers slipped, and she couldn't make any sound. Consequently, Matthew kicked her. She admitted that Matthew was a worthy opponent, but it was clear to everyone that he was still at a disadvantage. Moreover, Margaret had summoned the Bell of Death. Isn't the student's destructive power at your school a bit too much? He's so strong, I suggest letting him fight in the Exorcism Festival. Margaret's summoned Bell of Death was said to have a radius of 2,000 kilometers. 1 minute after the bell tolled, everyone affected would die. To stop the attack, one would have to snatch the wand from her, but Margaret also possessed voice teleportation magic, making it difficult for Matthew to catch her. Everyone outside the arena was sweating with tension. Dart was worried, questioning if the 2,000 kilometers would affect them too. Reams assured him it would only trigger within the arena, but it was still challenging for Matthew to catch Margaret amid the chaos. In the first 30 seconds, Margaret easily dodged Matthew. However, Matthew gradually got a handle on her movement style, grabbed a slab from the ground, and threw it at Margaret, blocking her path. Margaret ran fast, nearly slipping through a gap, but Matthew caught her cape with his little finger. Everyone says don't try to look cool in a fight. Wearing a cape is just asking to be grabbed. Just 1 second before the Bell of Death activated, Matthew grabbed the wand and broke it. Margaret lay on the ground, impressed that Matthew hadn't even used magic. He was somewhat mesmerized. Finn and Dart were moved to tears. Kusina also became somewhat interested in Matthew. Ott hadn't reacted yet when everyone felt a crushing magical pressure. The barrier in the sky shattered. Pure Origin appeared on the scene and paused time. He landed and touched Matthew's face, which looked somewhat affectionate. He called Matthew his son and mentioned he almost thought he'd never see him again. But Pure Origin's intent in finding Matthew wasn't familial. He planned to absorb Matthew to become stronger. However, the unaffected headmaster burst onto the scene. Pure Origin's boss, Kronos, talked about past grievances with the headmaster. Kronos had brought other subordinates, and while someone tried to attack the headmaster, they were deterred by his menacing aura. Kronos, talked about past grievances with the headmaster. Kronos stated his goal was to become a perfect being. His subordinates, family, and Matthew were all meant to help him achieve this perfect state. He claimed the right to take Matthew with him. The headmaster disagreed with letting Kronos take Matthew, believing that Matthew might change this magic-dominated world. Seeing this, Kronos exclaimed, "Are you not making it easy for me?" and immediately drew his wand to confront the headmaster. Both were Tier 3 magicians. Although Tier referred to the lines on their faces, it always seemed to imply that they were second-rate. One was the Dumbledore of the magic world, and the other was a Voldemort Pro Max version of Grindelwald. It was like a battle of demigods, with mere mortals suffering the consequences. One summoned the god of time, the other the god of the sky. Yet the unscrupulous Kronos also summoned some minions, as he only needed Matthew's body, indifferent to the lives of other students. Seeing this, the headmaster, abandoning all pretense, immediately used magic to awaken several strong students, instructing them to confront the demons to prevent harm to others. Without hesitation, Matthew charged into the demon horde. Even Ott set aside his differences with Matthew to assist Cosina. Together, they planned to tackle the demons first, then aid the headmaster against pure origin. Each demon possessed the strength of Tier 2 magic, and their numbers were seemingly endless, making them tough opponents. To avoid harming other students, the headmaster pulled Kronos into the sky for a battle. On the ground, Rams and Dart fought against the demons, hoping to hold out until reinforcements arrived. Unexpectedly, Kronos' subordinate, whom Dart remembered as Sere from their previous encounter with Abel, also joined the fight. Sere, intending to distract them, underestimated Matthew, leading him directly to Matthew. Trusting in Matthew's strength, Dart told him to focus on defeating Sere. Matthew confronted Sere, kicking down the tower he stood on. Sere, smiling, said it had been a while and he wouldn't let Matthew go this time. Realizing Matthew looked uneasy, he asked if he was the person sitting next to him at the opening ceremony. Sere's mood quickly soured when he realized Matthew didn't remember him. Simultaneously, Dart noticed an extra baby at the venue, and before he knew it, he too was turned into a baby. This subordinate's power could transform opponents into infants, rendering them weak and vulnerable. Realizing the danger, Dart immediately fled towards Reims for help. Reims turned to see Dart in baby form, picking him up while defending and attacking the demons. But as an infant, Dart was easily distracted by baby toys. Caught off guard, Reims was also hit by the magic, turning into a baby. The two infants, now easy targets for the demons, found themselves occasionally distracted by toys. Despite their reduced strength, Reims, a strong magician even in his childhood, managed to compress his magic and deliver a critical blow, severely injuring the subordinate. Though his power was diminished, Rams's strength as a child was still formidable. He easily defeated the physically weak subordinate, proving his top rank among his peers. Cosina remarked that it was rare to find a genius who could transcend age, a testament to the strength of their top magic academy. At the same time, Glenn was rushing to the scene with his subordinate. The subordinate wondered about the relationship between the headmaster and pure origin. Glenn explained that today's magical society was created by a great magician who was also the first god awakener, possessing divine-like powers. This magician, Adam, was the teacher of both the headmaster and Kronos. It's said that when Adam was alive, no one could match him. Since the headmaster and Kronos were fellow disciples, their strengths should be similar, but Kronos' attack suggested he was confident of victory. Glenn was now more worried about the headmaster's situation. Kronos removed his cloak, revealing a smooth egg-shaped head. No, he had no face, mimicking Voldemort who had no nose. However, he could restore his original face through magic. Kronos admitted his deep desires. He only wanted to take his son Matthew back and wished to see the headmaster perish. The headmaster was angry to discover Kronos had even used a forbidden spell. The situation was tense, while Matthew found it awkward as Sere looked like a talking pastry to him. Realizing Matthew truly didn't remember him, and even averted his gaze, a frustrated Sere shouted threats at Matthew and cast a spell. Seeing this attack, Matthew finally remembered Sere, who had seriously injured Abbas while protecting Abel. Dart was still concerned about Matthew since last time they fought. Sere was just a puppet, and they didn't know how tough his real body might be. Unbeknownst to them, Matthew was already sprinting on Sere's magic and landed a punch on his face. Sere couldn't believe it, as he previously had the upper hand over Matthew. Matthew remarked he had seen that move before and asked for something new, breaking Sere's defense. Adam, the legendary magician, had almost no rivals during his lifetime. He established the magical education system and the governing body, the Magic Bureau, bringing transformation to the magical community. In his later life, he focused on providing societal assistance to those unable to use magic. Adam believed that those in power should protect the weaker. He imparted his philosophy to 3 disciples, but Kronos, his second disciple, turned Adam's body into a puppet after his death. To be precise, he pieced Adam's torn body back into a complete human form, but could do nothing for the soul, allowing other magicians to control Adam's body. The headmaster was furious upon seeing this scene, and the puppet master controlling Adam's body launched an attack against him. This was Adam in his prime, with overwhelming magical power. The headmaster remembered Adam once telling him that those in high positions have the responsibility to guide the weaker, though he had always thought that the weak were just making excuses for their laziness. Adam was quite eccentric in his youth, and said the headmaster would understand his meaning one day, attributing such thoughts to his youth. For the headmaster, the teacher was a great figure in the past, but now he is a monster. It's a new era. If anyone tries to destroy the future, even if it's his teacher, he will stand up and fight. He is now the strongest in the world. The puppet master knew the headmaster was once the god awakener who ruled the country and still remains at the pinnacle with the strongest magic in the magical world. However, Adam's magic in his time could turn everything into nothingness. The puppet master was aware of Adam's dark magic, which could annihilate everything, making the headmaster's magic ineffective. Excited by such a powerful tool, the puppet master laughed and attacked the headmaster, but did not expect his dark magic to be dispersed by the headmaster, who then also erased the puppet master's body with a spatial cut. The puppet master firmly believed no magic could surpass Adam's dark magic, not even the headmaster's. However, his over-reliance on the power of Adam's magic was his downfall. He didn't realize that being the world's strongest isn't just about overpowering with magic. Battle experience counts too. Unfortunately, he lacked Adam's battle experience and relied solely on magic power for his attacks. The headmaster's spatial cut was just a wand attack. He hadn't even started his chant magic. With one attack, he wiped out both the puppet master and Adam. Now, he was left to confront Kronos. Meanwhile, Reams and Dart were still fighting demons on the ground, aiming to drain their magic power. Cosina wanted to help Matthew but couldn't leave the students unattended. Matthew was facing Saray and curious why Pure Origin was targeting him. Saray boldly answered his questions about the forbidden magic of body creation that connects the hearts of 6 blood-related people to create an immortal heart, a dark magic legend. Kronos prepared 6 children as vessels for this heart, and Matthew was one of them. Saray mocked Matthew as merely a part created by Kronos to craft a perfect body, adding that being part of a divine body was Matthew's honor. Matthew was shocked and asked if he was just protein powder for body fat. Saray was speechless at this bizarre description. Overwhelmed by the revelation, Matthew fell asleep and was awakened by Saray shaking him. Curious if Saray was his brother, Saray revealed he was just a clone created by their father from blood and a corpse, willing to sacrifice everything for his father. Saray was annoyed that his father chose Matthew, whom he saw as useless, suggesting he might as well offer up his body. Offer up his body? Is that something to say in public? Before Saray could finish speaking, Matthew slapped him in the face. It's rude to hit someone while they're speaking, Matthew said, not caring whether his life was heavy or useless. Anyway, you can't beat me. Yellowhair felt obligated to defeat Matthew since their father had created him. He therefore unleashed the full form of his magic wand, shocking Dart and the others nearby with the overwhelming magical power. Saray summoned a flying wheel made of diamonds that could easily cut through any material. Matthew frantically dodged the discs, realizing they could attack and defend, which seemed problematic. Saray thought Matthew was scared and boasted about killing all his classmates. He then summoned new black spikes, declaring that thousands of diamonds would pierce the students' bodies, threatening to kill all of Matthew's useless followers. Why would you provoke those young manga heroes who value friendship and bonds? This was like dancing in a minefield for Matthew. At that moment, Saray threw the disc at Matthew, who suddenly ran away. Saray thought Matthew was abandoning his teammates, but the next second, Matthew appeared behind him. He had run a lap around the school and returned. Saray believed his diamond armor would protect him, but when Matthew fell, he thought he had won. However, Matthew got up again and kept stuffing cream puffs into Saray's mouth, making it hard for him to breathe. Saray found this extremely strange, feeling like he had been choked by Matthew from the start, causing hallucinations. Thus, the disc never hit Matthew, and the diamond magic from above lost control due to Saray's lack of oxygen, rendering it useless. "Don't underestimate our physical combat god," they cheered. Glenn and his subordinate flew for 2 episodes and finally arrived at the scene. His subordinate, flying too fast, got caught in a time-stopping spell. Glenn braked just in time, realizing that those with lower magical power must have been immobilized. Fortunately, Glenn, with his strong magic and preparedness, managed to enter the barrier smoothly. He was worried about Matthew and thought 2 God Awakeners had resolved the demon situation. But then he heard Cosina praising Matthew for doing well and defeating a Pure Origin executive. Glenn then received news that the headmaster was dueling with Kronos from Pure Origin using teleportation magic, and now their location was unknown. Thus, Matthew decided to run around the academy again. Ott was about to interrogate Saray, but found him unconscious and magically whisked away, indicating other executives might still be present. This meant they couldn't leave the scene yet to protect other students, adhering to the headmaster's principle of the strong protecting the weak. They now could only hope that Matthew would find the headmaster. The 2 brothers are indeed geniuses. The older brother, the principal, can manage space, while the younger brother, Kronos, can control time. Kronos used his time magic to age half of the principal's body. To stop Kronos from controlling time further, the principal decided to eliminate all the surrounding space with space magic, which would also erase the concept of time. However, before the principal could cut the space, Kronos had already stopped time and relocated, then blasted off the principal's arm. Kronos pointed out that their skills had diverged because the principal cared about irrelevant things, while he only cared about his own power. The principal disagreed with Kronos' view. He didn't believe that life belonged only to himself. As a child, he was frail, performed poorly in school, and was introverted. For various reasons, he had to drop out and always felt that others would reject him. He wanted to flee before being rejected. However, Adam never gave up on him, visiting daily to cheer him up, despite the principal's rejections. Adam said he couldn't just leave the principal alone. Those words saved him. The principal believed he had come this far by accepting the kindness of others, so he couldn't ignore the weak. Even at the cost of his life, he would not change his beliefs, inherited from his teacher. The advantage of a 3rd-level magician lies in their ability to use 3rd-tier magic. The principal's 3rd-tier magic isolated the surrounding space and summoned the god of the sky. The god's space slash was unavoidable. Kronos didn't expect him to go this far. The principal then prepared his ultimate move, planning to end it with Kronos here, but time was stopped unexpectedly. Kronos stated he could halt the time of any space. From the gradual progression of their battle, the principal's defeat was inevitable. Kronos, as a former friend, said he would personally end the principal's life. However, even after being severely injured, the magic released from the principal's wand did not disappear. A vast amount of magic had been infused into the wand, allowing it to continue executing magic according to the master's will, even if the caster was gravely injured or dead. From the beginning, the principal had been infusing magic into the wand for this moment, to take Kronos with him. The principal believed that the students' efforts, their courage to protect their peers, and the acceptance of the weak could change the world's future. Therefore, even if it meant sacrificing himself to protect these children, he was willing. A bright light exploded, and the people at the exam site sensed something was wrong. They all knew it was the principal's magic, but seeing the light begin to contract, Rennie sensed danger immediately. It seems Kronos reversed time. He knocked away the principal's magic wand and claimed that, although he is strong, he is stronger, because he lives only for himself. The principal could never surpass him. As Kronos was about to finish off the principal wondered if his ideals would really be defeated by such narrow-minded thinking. He was regretting and preparing to die when unexpectedly, Matthew burst in and kicked Kronos' face so hard, it deformed. Matthew told the principal that when he enrolled, he asked himself a question. What would he do if faced with an enemy 100 times stronger? Matthew's answer was simple. Fight them and they'll behave. This time was no exception. Matthew's attitude while speaking was quite cool, except you couldn't look at his lower half crazily tumbling in the sky. Who needs a broom when you can kick to fly? Meanwhile, Glenn below sensed trouble, asked Cassina to look after the scene, and flew on a broom to find the principal. The principal was urging Matthew to run away because Kronos was too strong, but Matthew said his upbringing taught him to care for the weak and infirm. The principal wanted to say more, but stopped. Had he become weak and infirm? Kronos, seeing his son, was quite excited. He tried to take Matthew away without a second word, but Matthew completely ignored him. Suddenly, Kronos attacked the principal because while refining his time magic, Kronos had reconstituted his own body and gained the ability to steal others' magic, preparing to snatch the principal's space magic. Matthew pulled the principal out of the encirclement, only to find Kronos now controlled space magic and his magical power exceeded the principal's. Matthew was shocked. The world was doomed. Kronos said he had acquired space magic, and now the world was at his mercy. Next would be Matthew. The principal couldn't bear thinking about Matthew being taken away. Kronos had perfected his spiritual and physical magic. If that happened, the world was truly doomed. Without hesitation, Matthew charged at Kronos and hit him with a combo. But the gap in strength between Kronos and Matthew was significant. He hadn't even started to fight when his body began to collapse due to the immense magical power. The principal remembered Kronos saying he just wanted to become a perfect human, immortal, beautiful, and strong. But to contain all this magic, Matthew's nearly invincible body was the last piece of the puzzle. Kronos called Matthew merely a tool. His birth was just to make himself more perfect. The principal was furious. Who was Kronos to decide? Matthew's life was for Matthew to determine. Kronos mocked that Matthew, who knew no magic, was only fit to be a tool. Master Adam claims to protect non-magical ordinary people, yet they still face ostracism in a society built on magic. Even the principal has become such a victim. Kronos launched an attack on the principal, but Matthew, with the principal, dodged it. Matthew thinks it's a good opportunity since Kronos is the strongest in the magical community. Defeating Kronos might earn him societal recognition. Kronos considers Matthew's ignorance dangerous. However, his body is on the verge of collapsing, so he cannot continue fighting and escapes through a time rift, even scheduling a next battle. He then casts a spell towards the school, combining defeated demons into a giant one attacking the school. Kronos is curious to see if Matthew can stop this monster. The principal knows such a beast could destroy a city in moments. However, drained of magic, he falls from the sky and is caught by Glenn, who arrives on the scene. Glenn finds the principal severely injured and hears about Matthew's intervention. As Kronos leaves, the time magic over the school disappears, and students return to normal. They look up to see a halted competition and a giant monster, causing instant panic as it attacks. Rames and others block the stones it hurls while students flee and screams. Finn believes the monster is unbeatable. Raymond searches for Matthew. Dart attacks the monster, but finds it shielded by a magical immunity, likely the work of a high-ranking Pure Origin member. They must defeat this officer to harm the monster. Ott is already on his way to capture them, and Dart and Cassina start searching for suspects. Students trapped at the competition venue see the monster approaching, and panic ensues as it nearly smashes the venue. Unexpectedly, the monster's fist stops mid-air. Realizing something is wrong, Finn and Raymond climb high and indeed see Matthew holding back the monster's chain. Despite knowing Matthew's strength, they didn't expect it to this extent. Finn feels his worldview is once again challenged. Meanwhile, Matthew continues his tug-of-war with the monster, and other students also climb higher, shocked by the scene. Some discuss how Matthew, a non-magical, could never be recognized as number one at the school. However, some students speak up, saying that doesn't matter. Matthew is truly standing up to protect the school and them. The crowd is moved and cheers for Matthew. Go Matthew, the cycling big brother. Not really. Finn was deeply moved. In a world dominated by magic, Matthew carved a path with his physical attacks alone. Hearing Finn's support, Matthew exerted his strength and flung the demon away, causing an explosive noise. The students immediately erupted into cheers. Finn and Raymond excitedly joined Matthew's side. When the principal woke up from the infirmary, he was relieved to hear that Matthew had defeated the monster. He was reassured that one could survive in this society without magic. After all, who could withstand such physical attacks? Meanwhile, Dart and Cassina found the hiding Pure Origin officer. Ott killed the officer, accusing Cassina of being biased towards Matthew and suspecting his own decline. He stated he would never acknowledge Matthew. Cosina admitted he hadn't fully accepted Matthew either, but Ott couldn't deny Matthew's strength. The Pure Origin attack on the Magic Academy was a major event. To avoid chaos, the God Awakener officially handled it, but only Matthew knew the truth. At a time when he should have been somber, Matthew and his friends headed to the beach. Finn struggled to understand their mindset, but everyone was at the beach with friends for the first time and quickly got involved in the games. Matthew and Dart smashed a twisted watermelon, which Finn joked even a dog wouldn't eat. As Matthew and Dart continued their antics, Rames and others discussed Matthew's origins. No one expected Matthew to be a pure origin child, which could potentially lead to accountability in the future, possibly even affecting his chances at public service exams. Not really. The principal, despite his disabilities, stated that no matter what, this was Matthew's life, and his future would likely be challenging. Given Kronos' possession of powerful magic and the history of the magic world, finding an opponent for Kronos would be difficult. Kronos' subordinates included a group of 5 brothers, all among the top magicians in the world, some even stronger than the principal himself. The principal noted that from the current situation, their chances of winning were almost nil. However, he believed Matthew was the unknown factor, not easily provoked with his physical prowess. The battle between absolute physics and absolute magic worried Raymond about Matthew's condition. Matthew reassured her that his muscles wouldn't let him down, but the principal knew Matthew's greatest advantage was his never-give-up spirit. He looked forward to Matthew's future. Matthew vowed to defeat his enemies and graduate happily with everyone. Just then, Rames suddenly mentioned that final exams were approaching, and failing even one subject could result in expulsion, silencing everyone. After testing Matthew, Raymond and the others discovered that he hadn't passed a single subject. Previously, he could at least scrape by on written tests, but Matthew's brain would shut down at the mere mention of studying. Surprisingly, Dart, who appeared to be the least intelligent, performed quite well. Dart had his own logic, believing that studying was the easiest way to achieve goals without affecting anything, so he simply worked hard at it every day. This revelation shocked Matthew. Under the intense review sessions with his 4 friends, Matthew felt overwhelmed and considered giving up, but they insisted on helping him study for a while. Unable to face reality, he eventually attempted to escape through a window. Rames stated that if Matthew was unwilling to learn, they couldn't force him. However, Finn refused to give up and immediately went after him, only to find Matthew had buried himself in the ground. Matthew apologized for his inability to study, but Finn encouraged him, pointing out that Matthew always faced strong opponents bravely, and that he genuinely wanted to graduate with Matthew. Motivated by Finn's words, Matthew returned and asked his friends to continue teaching him. Dart was about to make a sarcastic remark when he heard Raymond encouraging Matthew, which made him feel dismissed before he could explain that he wasn't being petty. With their careful tutoring, Matthew persevered until the final exams. On the day of the exam, his brain was not functioning well, but when the results came out, he had barely passed. Just then, an upperclassman rushed in with news that a newspaper had reported someone at their school couldn't use magic. This upset the locals, who stormed the school demanding Matthew be expelled, as their academy was the strongest magic school, and having someone who couldn't use magic was seen as an affront to the gods. At that moment, Raymond stood up for Matthew, stating that his inability to use magic wasn't his fault. However, the crowd dismissed her as irrelevant, at which point she declared herself to be Matthew's wife, confusing the crowd even more. Dart, protective as ever, provocatively stepped in, making the situation harder to handle. Both Dart and Raymond were fiercely defensive, and Raymond was even attacked with stones from below. Rames held Matthew back, saying his involvement would only complicate matters. Raymond told everyone that it wasn't Matthew's fault he couldn't use magic, and if he was to be punished for such a reason, she would stand by him, even if it meant facing discrimination and insults. She believed Matthew was a kind person, and not a bad individual at all. The citizens below were not commendable. They only wanted to quickly capture a God Awakener who couldn't use magic to make a name for themselves in society. They even believed that people who couldn't use magic had no rights, and labeled Raymond as Matthew's accomplice. As they were about to attack Raymond, Matthew stepped forward and effortlessly shattered the citizens' magic. His counterattack stunned the crowd. Matthew declared that although they couldn't acknowledge him now, he he would one day become the strongest in the magical world and prove that being unable to use magic was also fine. Eventually, the principal intervened, explaining that Matthew had been kept at the school, but any punishment would wait until Matthew passed the God Awakener exam, which would be assessed by the Magic Bureau. He also told Matthew that he had a group of great friends who would stand up for him. Matthew expressed that since enrolling, he had met good friends and would become a God Awakener to protect them.